Tales from the Crypt is a 1950s EC comic. Anyone who knows EC Comics knows the story, but I'll reiterate it here. Tales from the Crypt never had an issue 1 back in the day. It started as Crime Patrol. Crime Patrol had a whole bunch of crime stories and stuff, and by issue 11 or so, they introduced one horror tale to try and expand their range a bit, test it out, see if people liked it. By issue 15 and 16, they had covers that called out a promise that they were going to have a horror comic from the crypt. And by issue 17, the title was changed from Crime Patrol to Crypt of Terror. Crypt of Terror lasted from issue 17, 18, and 19. And then, with issue 20, Crypt of Terror became Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt lasted another 20 or so issues until the witch hunt of Dr. Wortham happened and changed comics forever with the Comics Code. That's a whole other discussion. But in that heyday, Tales from the Crypt and its sister publications, Haunt of Fear, Vault of Horror, Weird Science, Crime Suspense Stories, Two-Fisted Tales, on and on and on. Those were gold. And to this day, the stories live on. Of course, Tales from the Crypt had a huge heyday in the 90s into the 2000s or so with the HBO TV series, which had 2 feature films as well. A game show spin-off, a cartoon spin-off, toys, a talking Crypt Keeper doll, and of course my favorite, the comics were reintroduced to kids with a series of reprints, which were awesome. I bought all of these, and I couldn't get enough of these. I was collecting comics at the time, 90s comics, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, all that stuff. But I really enjoyed the EC comics, and that's saying something because these comics were from the 50s. They're fairly timeless, and the horror is so gruesome that it's still fairly shocking to this day. It's great stuff. Tales from the Crypt. This is issue 20. This is the first issue of Tales from the Crypt. If you've never read these EC comics from the 1950s, you should really do yourself a favor and track them down. There's all sorts of archives and reprints of these. Don't be afraid that they're sort of out of touch or very antiquated. They're not. They're intense horror tales that are fairly timeless and gruesome as well. If you like gruesome horror, then you'll love Tales from the Crypt. This cover features, part of the story that you're going to see in the comic itself. This guy's like, no, it can't be. That name he's cutting on the gravestone, that's my name. And my date of birth, but the date of death, that's today. Dun dun dun. So there you go. That totally happens in the comic. Here's a little advertisement for a Comics Code seal before Dr. Wortham got his hands on the comic industry. So, Tales from the Crypt, of course, was hosted by the Crypt Keeper, who is a lot different than what you saw in the TV series from HBO. He's just an old, decrepit man. And he hosts the stories, and he has a whole bunch of jokey one-liners and puns and everything. So this story is The Thing from the Sea. So The Thing from the Sea was penciled by Al Feldstein, who has signed his name here. And the cover was by Johnny Craig. And the editor-in-chief, of course, is Al Feldstein. So this guy wants to board this really crowded luxury liner, and he can't get a room. The only room he can get is 13, but the thing is that there's a curse on the stateroom 13. People always are driven mad, or they request to be moved. No one ever completes their voyage on stateroom 13. And the guy's like, well, what's the problem? What is it? And the captain's like, I don't, it's horrible. I don't really know, whatever, something frightens people. So this guy is in Stateroom 13 with this other guy who could only get that room as well. And he's like, oh, hello, I guess you must be my roommate, glad to meet you. Same here, rather small stateroom, isn't it? I had to take it, only one left. So they're going to sleep. He's in the top bunk, and our guy is going on the bottom bunk. So partway through the night, the portal, like the window is open, and he hears the guy that's in the top bunk scream and run away. And he's like, what the? And he's like, what's wrong? And the guy's like, no, no, no. And then he hears someone moaning on the top bunk. And he assumes it's the guy, his roommate. But it might not be. And he thinks, oh, not a very good sailor. Poor chap, listen to him moan. He thinks he's seasick or something. Anyways, the top bunk is still closed off. It's still curtained off, so he doesn't want to disturb him. So he goes and he reports all this. He goes and he reports all this to the captain, and the captain's like, "Yeah, that guy. He left your room. He's cowering in a passage like a babbling idiot." And captain's like, "Look, come in my cabin for the rest of the voyage. It's fine." And he's like, "You're over exaggerating here. It's like, listen, I want to figure this out." And overnight, the portal is open, and there's a moaning coming from the top bunk. So that really spooks him because there shouldn't be anyone there. When he opens the bunk, sure enough, there's a shambling creature monster thing in there, and he's like, "Keep away, keep away." So it shambles off. He tries to follow it, and it falls into the sea. So he reports all this to the captain here, and he's like, "Let's you and I both like figure this out, right?" So they go into the stateroom together, and they're going to like camp out overnight and figure this out. And so overnight, sure enough, the portal opens, and the shambling monster is there. But the problem is, the captain knows who this guy is. And he's like, "You're dead. I murdered you." So the shambling monster is moving in towards the captain and kills him. And then runs back out into the portal, and the portal gets bolted supernaturally. And so, and the Crypt Keeper's like, that's the story, dear reader. The captain received the shock of his life, eh? Well, you should have realized you can't get away with murder, not even at sea. On your own ship. Oh, by the way, if you ever really sail the Ocean Queen, ask for Stateroom 13. Tell him I sent you. This story, there were prose stories in these comics, and they're usually one page. So this story is about a guy who's searching for a missing friend somewhere in the jungle, and he realizes the shrunken head that they're worshipping is the shrunken head of his friend. That's basically it. It's very gruesome stuff. It's interesting to read. One little page story, horror story. So here's the next story, A Fatal Caper. Dun dun dun, what's that? Like a monster or something carrying a woman. Alright, so this woman is trying to find things to do. It's the 1950s, there's no internet, they're all bored. She wants to dabble in the occult. And so she dabbles in some spells and stuff, and all the friends are over. And she inadvertently conjures up an evil spirit. And the evil spirit's causing things like it's turning off the lights and everything. It's playing with the candles. It shambles around like, what was it? I didn't see. Some monster man. An awful thing. Help me, Marilyn. Are you alright, Marilyn? Answer me. So, Marilyn's all freaking out about like something she saw. She's taken away. They're all freaked out, and one by one they get picked off by this thing. And they hear, eerie voices like, Peter, please come to me. And one by one there's like, fog and everything, and they all get picked off by this thing. And they're like, help us, the ones that have been picked off by this monster. It's like, look in the book. So they try to conjure up a spell to bring these guys back, but something comes out of the spell, as you see there, and takes the last remaining woman away, and hits the remaining dude. He's like, got to get help, can't fight by myself, too weak. Can just about reach the phone. And then it's grabbed by this monster. And he faints. So the monster then grabs him and shoves him in a coffin. And he could barely breathe in this coffin. Well, it turns out that these guys just playing a prank on this poor guy. And they've trapped him in this coffin. And they took out a body. They dug up a body and took out a body to do this. So they're like, let's go get the body and bring it back. Meanwhile, they're in a cemetery. So the groundskeeper of the cemetery gets the next coffin, which is the one this guy's in. And then he goes to bury that body. And the friends come back and, the coffin is gone. So they run to the caretaker and say, like, did you bury a body? And he's like, yeah, but I wouldn't open that coffin for all the gold in Fort Knox. I buried him plenty deep. That man died from leprosy. Anyone who touches the corpse will get it. And they all have leprosy now. And that guy is toast as well. He's buried deep. He won't survive. They won't be able to dig him up. The end. That's a gruesome story. Here's a bunch of like, goings on as to other comics out at the time. Weird Science, another great, gruesome science fiction magazine. Here's a story, Backfire, about a guy who doesn't like a dog and tries to drown a dog tries to drown that dog he doesn't like in a room that apparently you can't get out of or something. Of course, he gets trapped in there and dies. That's basically the story. More nuanced than that, but there you go. You see on the right stories from the Bible, which is where a lot of this stuff started. I mean, EC Comics was publishing stories like stories from the Bible, and then got into horror and stuff like that to expand. Old Testament #1, New Testament #1. That's awesome. I wonder how much those are now. Here you have the letters page, and also a little explanation on the left as to why the comic kept changing titles. So it was Crypt of Terror, and now it's Tales from the Crypt. And they give a jokey reason as to why, but, there you go. You got letters from people who are loving these horror comics at the time. And you have this Crypt Keeper's Literary Selections, a further listing of my favorite fine mystery literature, which you can obtain at your local library. So they're teaching you to read, they're teaching something. H.P. Lovecraft, Lurker at the Threshold, Boris Karloff, and The Darkness Falls, and Bram Stoker, and it's not Dracula, it's The Mystery of the Sea. Great little picks, actually. They're off the beaten path from the typical of like Lovecraft and Bram Stoker. That's pretty cool. Encouraging, more reading in kids. So this is RX Death. So I should say A Fatal Caper was penciled by Jack Kamen. RX Death is penciled by Graham Ingalls. And that's the splash page that introduces everything. So this guy, I guess he's living with his sister. I guess that was a thing in the 50s. And he's working too hard. She wants him to not work so hard. So she wants a doctor to prescribe something to him. She goes with the prescription to this dude that runs a pharmacy. And he's like, oh, this is an exotic drug, but I think I have it. So he then gets this drug, and he's a lot more social now. He's going out every day. That's great, you know. But one of his fingers is withered for some reason, and she's like, oh, you should get that checked out. So this happens more and more. Like his hand is becoming more and more withered, and the sister is worried. So she goes back to the doctor, and she's like, well, you prescribed this thing. What the hell was it? And then they go to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist is like, yeah, but, you know, this is what you prescribed. And it's like, this is not what I prescribed, but it looks like you took it from a jar that had something else. He's like, this is not the drug. He's like, I've had it for some time, maybe a few years. I don't know what to say. So, they're worried about this, and so the guy is going to check out what was given to him, and it's going to take a week or so. Meanwhile, you know, the brother is going out and doing stuff. That's what she wanted, but he's getting more and more angry and more withered and just irritable, and he won't eat or anything. And so the doctor's like, I haven't heard from the laboratory yet, Miss Bennett, but I think I'd better come over. And she's like, yes, doctor. So he goes upstairs to check on the brother, and he's like, do not send for me again, Miss Bennett. I can't do anything in this house. And she's like, but doctor. So she sees in the window something that might be him. He's mutated and strange looking. A formless, ghastly, rotting thing. And so they go up to check him out, and before they do that, something is leaking through the ceiling from upstairs. And it's like a black rot. And they go up to check him out, and he's like a black, oozing, rotting thing with glowing eyes in the corner, and lashes out at them, and the doctor beats it to death until it lived no more. That's what. And so that's the story. Disturbing stuff, great horror stuff. I love it. You know, this is timeless. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's from the 50s. It's not lame at all. So here's the story from the cover. In the spring, a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of impending doom. So this dude drew a face that he doesn't know why. And he's like, love and Mike, will you look at this? Why in the world did I draw this face? So he takes a walk, and he hears someone hammering. I guess this was a thing in the 50s. He hears someone hammering in a house, so he goes to check it out. It's not your property, dude. So it's a stone cutting gravestones, and he goes to the guy who's putting in an engraving on a stone, and he sees that the dates are his dates. It's his birth date, his name, and the date of death is that day. And he's stunned, and he sees the guy who's chiseling it is the guy that he drew. It's weird. So he's like, good Lord, this is fantastic. Your face. You are the man I drew. What's going on? Am I dreaming? It's like, calm down, mister. Take it easy. What's the matter? right? So he shows him, he explains the whole thing. And he's like, I admit it's odd, all right, but I don't believe in such a thing as fate or anything like that. Say, come in the house. My wife would like to see this picture. So here's the wife. She's very beautiful. And they had met before. They had dated before. Ted, you know what, Ellen? And it's like, you know each other? It's like, yeah, we used to be friends years ago. And she's like, yes, very good friends. It's grand to see you again, Ted. You must stay for dinner. We can talk about old times. So he stays for dinner, and she's paying a bit too much attention to Ted, and the husband notices. So, so they're arguing and stuff, and Ted's like, well, maybe I should go. And she's like, nonsense. So he's like, I've had enough. I'm going out to my workshop. There's some things I want to do. He's like, go ahead, run, you spineless simpleton. For all I care, you can go out and never come back. So she's flirting with Ted, and Ted's like, you're married. And she's like, forget about Alex, Ted. Just think of you and me. It's been a long time, but you haven't forgotten, have you, Ted? You couldn't forget me. And so, anyways, they kiss. And that's enough. The husband comes back with a mallet, and he's crazy looking. And so it cuts to later on. The cops are there. It's like, what happened? Alex Cordova just killed some guy, caught him with Mrs. Cordova, beat him to a pulp. And so they hang him. And that's it. The guy died that day, just like that tombstone said. The end. Here's your typical, how to get strong quickly ad in a comic book. This happened all the time. Your typical comic strip where a big, like, strapping He-Man beats up a guy in a beach, and then he gets like more pumped up and comes back. So whatever. Uh Here's jewelry, and here's other stuff, and that's the comic. I hope you enjoyed this. I really like Tales from the Crypt. I hope to do more like this. So stay tuned. Take care.